Welcome to Life to the Full, a message to Christians. This is a podcast about the abundant life that God promises in Scripture. We want to inspire those who are frustrated with themselves and their communities to live a transformed life that will impact the world.
That's right, honey. Our primary purpose is to be a platform that will impact the world through conversation. We want to invite others to connect and unite in curiosity, vulnerability, and responsibility. A transformed life is about growth, learning, and evolving.
A transformed life leads to transformed communities, and transformed communities impact the world. One conversation at a time.
Welcome to our second live stream to Live to the Full podcast.
Yeah. It's really been our second. I feel like we've done so many.
Yeah, well, this is the first official one, and we do have a special guest. He's already in the green room.
In the green room. I love that we have an actual green room.
Well, right now his room looks red, and there's some. I believe he's in the living room.
It's like a metaphorical green room.
Exactly. All right, honey. So I know that you are getting started with Summer of Saul.
Yes, super excited about this. I used to have a lot of problems with Saul, just especially reading it, just confusion and just like misunderstanding of what he was saying. And, I went through my own process, my own journey of just falling in love with Paul, all over again. And I'm excited this summer to share some of that with you all. And it should be a great time. We have this live stream to kick it off. And we have, a special guest to come and talk to us about Rabbi Saul or the Apostle Paul.
That's right. Yeah. And shout out. Hi, Nicole Washington. She just said nice smiley face.
Hey, Nicole.
We're streaming both on YouTube and Facebook. So without any further ado, we're going to introduce our guest. So excited. So we got to actually hang out a little bit. Well, Jimmy, you hung out a little bit more with him.
I got two burgers. You only got one.
Exactly. That's fine. All right, let's bring him in. Our guest is Steve Johnson. We're going to bring Steve Johnson by taking me out of the picture. Where is Steve? Oh, there he is.
How's it going, Steve?
Good to see you guys. Can you hear me okay? You're breaking up a little bit on this end. I don't know. This is a new medium for me. And I got my browser to finally cooperate with it just in the nick of time. But it's good to see you guys.
Yeah.
It's good to see you too. It's good to see you too. That's right. It doesn't always work with Safari, right? You had to probably use something else.
It's on Safari right now. I just made it into submission.
That's good. What time is it in Portland? 4 p.m., right? 3 hours? Yeah. Yeah. Got it. What did you have for lunch today? I know you took us to a really yummy place. What did you have for lunch?
Yeah.
You remember those food trucks that we walked past?
Yes.
A friend of mine came by, and they just lifted the restrictions here in Oregon. And so I took a buddy down, and we saw everybody without their mask for the first time in about 16 months, something like that. And,
wow. Yeah. You got to see people's smiles. That is awesome. Nicole Washington says, "Hey, Steve, this is so cool. Check it out, Steve. We could actually see the comments that come in through on Facebook at the bottom. So yeah, we're putting some comments in there. I love this tool. Okay, I'm gonna geek out.
Please give us a tour.
I want you to teach me, Yoda. I'd like to learn this. I'll probably switch from Safari over to Chrome or something to be able to make it work. But I set things up if there's a gadget, it got set up automatically where I can just sort of
click.
everything works. But I'll take your word for being able to read these things on the screen. It's all kind of small.
Yeah, and I'll most likely will be coming off the screen while you and Jimmy talk, and then when you guys see me, that means that there's a comment that I'll share. So that will be the cue. The cue is you see me, then that means. So for example,
where'd she go? Where is she?
And just like that.
Is it bigger now?
And then I come. That means we have someone.
Wow.
Yeah, so we could play around. We could also watch things together. Yeah, let's do the tour. Okay, so another thing that you could do is watch videos together.
Welcome to Life to the Full.
We could talk over the video.
This is a podcast about the abundant life that God.
So that's one thing. We could also share our screen. You know, I'll take this time to show everyone our YouTube channel. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to share a YouTube channel so people are aware of our channel. Can you see it, Steve and Jimmy?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Yeah, I see it now as well. So go ahead and give it a like, or if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit the bell to make sure that you're not missing any of the new episodes. So we have that. We could do other things, Steve. We could show people. We could tell them other banners such as subscribe and leave a review in iTunes. So it's really cool. So we could share a lot in here. So I'm going to stop the screen share. And yeah, we get talking about Summer of Saul, which I'm really excited. So Jimmy?
Yeah. So Steve, thanks so much for coming on and being willing to talk to us a little bit about Paul. Yeah, I'm excited to hear everything, you know, the way, you know, if Paul has evolved for you over the years and the way you've read him and the way you've come to understand him. For those of people out there who might not know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Steve Johnson?
That's a good question. I could whip out my driver's license and read you the facts on that. That's about it. Lisa and I live here in Portland, Oregon, with our daughters and 2 dogs, and the heat that's been fairly inescapable the last year. It's cooled down today, but you missed the really hot days. It was 116, a new record the other day.
Really?
So, kind of Phoenix, yeah, sort of Phoenix weather. But I like that. But you know, who am I? I've been trying for many years to figure that out myself. But I used to live there in New York, not too far from where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And those were wonderful times for some of us. But yeah, I've been here in Portland. They still let me talk sometimes.
Nice.
And but I learned a long time ago that it's most important. You know, I married the right person. People like Lisa, so they put up with me.
I've heard you say before, "Hi, I'm Steve, Lisa's husband."
That's me.
Yeah. You were always one of my favorite preachers back in the day. You know, you always had very memorable stories, very funny. You know, I think you're probably one of the funniest preachers from back in the day. You know, helped start.
You mean like a clown funny? You mean I make? What do you mean funny?
Like you have good stories. You know, I think someone who's a good teacher, they have good, memorable stories. Like, you know, like Jesus. Jesus had a lot of really great, good stories, and a lot of them have stuck with me all these years. You're a motorcycle enthusiast, right? You love your motorcycle and going on trips. And we've got a little RV now. That and hiking has sort of filled in a lot of the motorcycle time has sort of gone to that lately. But there will, God willing, there'll be a motorcycle trip in about a month with my secret motorcycle gang. I can't tell you any more about it. I just want you to know that I've got one. Nice. It's secret though, huh?
It's a secret. It's a well kept secret that everybody that knows me knows. But,
I love it. I love it. You're also an actor, right? You know, those one act
now,
plays. Yeah.
I'm acting at this moment. I
Awesome.
May I add comedian to this?
Oh, I just got it. He's acting right now. Funny, Steve. Funny, Steve. That was a good dad joke. That was good. That was really good.
Yeah. Did you guys hear? I wanted to add comedian to this as well. I had to come in to say that.
Yes. Yeah.
And cheeseburger aficionado.
Yes.
Sí. Oh, y Steve también habla español para todos los que hablan español. Él ha vivido en Venezuela, ¿correcto, Steve?
Sí, viví en Caracas.
En Caracas, Venezuela, por unos años después de que...
No. Por 2 meses.
Oh, 2 meses.
Sí, estudié español por solamente 45 días.
Wow.
Pero yo soy muy inteligente. El español es muy fácil. Es la lengua de Dios. Entonces...
exacto.
Sí,
exacto.
Sí. Muy guapo, muy guapo.
And that is as much as Jimmy knows. And for those who don't speak Spanish, Steve actually lived in Caracas, Venezuela for 2 months. He learned Spanish in 45 days because he's a very intelligent man.
I just used that in burrito, and I've used every word that I know in Spanish. But that was right before Lisa and I got married. We were going to live there, but instead we ended up staying for a couple of years in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then moving to Boston. And then, of course, that's the beginning of a story that led us to meeting a lot of folks like you guys.
Yeah.
From Boston to New York and all over the place. But yeah.
Yes.
No, a long time ago. Yeah, we had plans on going to South America, to Caracas, especially, and. In fact, a very good friend bought an oil well and was using the proceeds from the oil well to support us to go to Venezuela. We ended up giving that support to someone else that took our place.
Got it.
And we took $400 a month and moved to Boston in 1979.
I'm very grateful. Well, 1979?
The 1900s, way back in the 1900s.
You know, Jimmy was born in 1979. Look at that. Ever since Jimmy has been alive in this planet. Wow.
Yeah. And we have when were you born, honey? 1976. Yes. I knew that. I didn't have to ask.
That's when I met Lisa, was 1976. You babies.
Look at that.
Both a couple of babies.
We were born in very very special times for you, right? 76, Lisa, 79, Boston. You're welcome.
The 70s. Wow.
Yeah. The 70s. Yeah, for sure. That's awesome, Steve. Okay. All right. I'm going to head out and manage the chat in there. Thank you.
Sounds good. So, Steve, I have a funny story about this. This is the block of igneous that you got us. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obsidian.
So I had it in my bag, and I didn't check anything. I wore a backpack, so I packed everything in my backpack. And all of a sudden, I'm on the line, and I'm like, oh wow, I have like a big sharp block of obsidian in my backpack. I hope they let me, take it through. And Patty started panicking a little bit. She's like, oh no, I want to be able to get this home. I love this block of obsidian. And my bag got pulled out, and the guy who pulled it out was like, sir, do you have a bag of sand in your backpack? And I'm like, yes. I got like all nervous. I was like, yes, no, not really. And he's like, could you open this up for me? He couldn't figure out how to open my book bag. So we open it up, and he goes, oh. And I feel like this is the most Portland thing I experienced in my time in Portland. He goes, oh, you don't have a bag of sand. You have a rad block of obsidian. And he goes, do you mind if I take this to teach my staff, have a teaching moment with my staff? I was like, sure. So he takes it. He comes back about 5 minutes later. He passed me in the back. He's like, dude, awesome block of obsidian. You know, like, you enjoy your trip. And I was like, wow. I don't think that would happen in New York. I think they might have been like, no, you can't keep that.
Yeah. Not sure everybody would have known what it was. Why have you got a big hunk of broken glass in there?
Exactly. Right. That's what it kind of looked like.
I'm glad it made it. I like that. I don't know. This is a rock a friend of mine gave me, and then I've got my obsidian pieces over here.
Oh, nice.
So this is one of, I don't know a ton about obsidian. I'm just sort of learning about it. But this is, I picked this one up just because it's a different color. And there's several colors of obsidian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, anyway, next time you come, and you need to come back, we'll go over to Glass Butte, and I'll let you dig up your own obsidian.
Absolutely. That'd be really cool. I've always wanted to do that. Like, I'm kind of like an amateur geologist. I love this stuff. I love poking around the ground, seeing what we can find. We have some of our science programs that we do with kids. Yeah. So I still get to get my science bug from that. But yeah, we're not here to talk about science. We're here to talk about Paul, right? So for you, when you hear the name Paul, what are some of the things that come to mind? Like, how has Paul affected you over the years?
Oh, wow. I grew up going to church and going to Sunday school and hearing the story of Saul, who became Paul, ever since I was a child. And he certainly, if we always need to remember the Lord is the star of the show. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But to me, two of the most fascinating characters in the Bible are David. Most guys like David, because he's got he's got giants and ghosts and witches and sword fights and sling. He's got all this and pretty girls and all the stuff that we. And but the other story is Paul is so much of the New Testament. Paul, he's depending on which scholars you listen to, what you subscribe to. He either wrote almost half of the New Testament, or he wrote at least 7 books of the New Testament.
Right.
And he takes up almost half of the book of the Acts of the Apostles. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think about just my whole life hearing and reading and talking, and then later preaching about him, or repeating sermons of his, and of course when Sherwin and I wrote the musical Upside Down, in the original version, it was sort of almost chapter by chapter through the book of Acts,
right?
And so much of that musical was just locked in on Saul and his adventures, and in my mind, I often pictured Saul looking a lot like Sherwin. Made such an impact on me playing Saul. If Sherwin was darker skinned and curlier hair, I would probably just say that's what Saul looked like and how he acted. I thought Sherwin nailed it. But so yeah, the first. I know we planned on having a discussion, about something today, and when you just said the first thing I think about Saul, really, probably the first thing I think is that I owe him an apology.
Really?
I don't think I was ever like super critical of him. A lot of people, I've known men and women that didn't like Paul, and they said he didn't like women. And I know that while I loved him and liked him, and I like women, I thought, well, you still gotta love Paul, and I probably had a stilted view of him myself.
Sure.
But as I've gotten older, I don't think anybody mirrors the ministry of Jesus Christ more than the Apostle Paul did.
Absolutely.
I think his ministry I mean, in so many ways. There, you sort of have to use your imagination and a bit of reason to suspect that maybe at one point he was married, to have arose in the esteem that he held with people at the time. He was if not a member, an agent of the Sanhedrin court. I mean, there's so many things about him that usually, along with being those things, to be a Jewish man in good standing, he probably would have been married. But that's all. We don't really have any information. I don't think there's even much extra biblical information about that. But the Paul that we see in the New Testament is a single man who is completely dedicated to his missions, and he goes from one mission that he believes he's serving God and honoring God, and then reveals that he's going against God, and so he repents, and you see him pour himself totally in to this mission of sharing Christ with the rest of the world. So, like Jesus was single, you see that he's single. The part that we see,
right?
Like Jesus changed the culture. He worked within the culture and worked around the culture. You see Paul doing the same kinds of things. You see him, the men and the women in his ministry, to me, reflect the glory of the Lord's ministry of men and women, and so the more I of course I don't really want to focus. Lisa and I are kind of known right now for this subject of mutuality.
Yeah, mutuality. Yeah,
and I don't want to. I'd like to talk about Paul and not get sidetracked, or I'd like to not soapbox on that subject. I would like to say, the more I began reading the Bible in a different way, the more I saw Saul, like so many other Bible characters, almost all the other Bible characters, but Saul especially, I saw in a completely different light. Especially in regards to how he treated people and what he was doing, and how he was going about his ministry. And I don't think that, anyway, I'm being redundant. I don't think there was anyone who we can say anyone whose ministry more reflected Jesus than Paul.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, well, for me, I always loved Paul, like right out of the gate, because I felt like I loved his logical arguments. I loved he had like very quotable sayings. When I first, came into the New York church, we were doing this thing in the campus ministry where we were memorizing like 100 verses of scripture, and most of them, came from like Paul. So I got a lot of Paul into me right away. But my first thing where I was like, that doesn't really make sense is, I don't know if you guys still do this, but when I was coming into the church, we would do these studies, just to see, okay, are you ready to join the church? Do you know enough to be one of our members? And we got to something that we used to call counting the costs. And, we went through everything. It was like, check, everything was good. And then the guy who was counting the cost with me, he got to one little like point. He's like, oh yeah. And there's this thing about how women can't preach and can't teach, in church, but we're fine with that, right? I'm like, wait, what? I was mostly raised by my grandmother, so it was like, I was like, no, I'm not cool with that. Like, what do you mean? And so we started looking at some verses from Paul, to kind of like explain that. And it became like a thing. Like we had to stop what we were doing, and we had to come back next day.
What year was that?
I think it was 2000, maybe 2001.
That sounds very unusual to me. I wonder if you had said something earlier, like if you've been going to church and you said, hey, why aren't the women doing this? Because I never counted the cost, or would have thought to have counted the cost on that. Now, I know Lisa did with women a lot, but with guys, I've never heard. For what it's worth, I've never heard a story like that.
I think it was one of those things where the guy who was counting the cost with me, he just wanted to be thorough, and he was like, oh, and there's this, and he was like, because he actually said to me, I remember this clear as day. He goes, okay, wow, I've never actually had to deal with this before, with a guy having to go through this. And then so we looked at all these scriptures to kind of like justify what he was saying. But it was one of those things that, like, at the time, I was like, okay, I guess I love this community. I love this church. I'm excited about the Bible. Maybe this is what it says. And it was only because the way I was taught, like, to read Paul was very, like, we would take it like verse by verse, a verse here, a verse there, and it wasn't really until, like, I started reading, like, entire letters that I was like, oh, wow, this guy is all about the new humanity. This guy is all about bringing the world back together. There's no slave nor free, no male, no female, no Jew or Gentile. And I just saw him in a totally different light. And I got very excited by him. I could see how much what he was doing and what he was saying was informed by Jesus and the rest of, the Hebrew scriptures, and how he was pushing that forward. And I was like, we need to talk more about that. We need to talk about more about, so, my understanding of Paul evolved over the years. And it sounds like for you, your understanding of Paul evolved as well over the years.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say a lot. If we were writing Upside Down now, the musical that we did, I mean, I've thought of this for years. How there's a lot of things we sort of painted ourselves into a corner.
Really,
especially in the hearts and minds of people that seem to own it as much as we do. But the different picture that I get of Paul is, it's like I said, I get a different picture of a lot of characters in the Bible, and it's not really, for me personally, it's not just Paul's attitude or our attitude, your experience. It's not with women,
right?
I get. It bugs me when people say the women's issue. It's not really the women. I mean, if you're going to put it in that kind of language, it's more of a men's issue than a women's issue. It's more of a dude's issue, I think.
It's a human rights issue.
And well, that's what I was going to say. I think it's bigger than that. I think it's about racism. I think it's about any time. One of the most amazing things about Jesus is that even though he was in equality with, in essence, God, he didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, making himself a servant.
Yeah.
And he told his followers, don't lord it over people like the Gentiles do. Whoever wants to be great has got to be has to be the least. You have to be a servant of all. And then he demonstrated that. And then you look at Saul and all the things he endured, and all the stuff that he went through. And there's some funny stories. I mean, I hope we can get some of the funny stories about Saul. But
sure, yeah.
But you do see somebody who had a bigger agenda. And the only way I can come to any peace, there's a lot of things in the Bible that bug me. Do you have things in the Bible that bug you?
Absolutely, yes.
I hope it's okay. There's things, but a lot of it is because sometimes I'm out of tune with the bigger agenda that God had, I think, to reconcile all of us to Him, that we're all His children, to bring us to Him, and so I don't want to impose my 21st century opinions, onto Paul. I don't want to read into the scriptures. Well, I've got new opinions and new ideas, and so I'm seeing these things in the Bible. But I certainly look at Paul and thinking, men and women being, of course, slaves and free, of course, but it's bigger than that.
Yeah,
it's bigger than that. We get to be one with the Father. The Son is the firstborn. He is the prototype. He is setting the example. We get to be, we went from being in the dark to being servants, and then friends, and now actually co-heirs, brothers. And there's a bigger story. But along the way, to me, I see a lot of verses that people. That I used to use, that I used to teach to sort of clobber people with,
Yes.
This verse says what it says, and I'm not a Greek scholar, but I can look things up.
Yep.
And used to and looking things up. I had from the time I was a child, I had a very particular way of reading the Bible. I was taught a specific way of how we read. What's the word? Hermeneutics. Our Church of Christ hermeneutics were very, very specific.
Yes.
And as I've gotten older, and let me say something. For what it's worth, not that anybody asks me or necessarily cares. I love the Church of Christ. I love, and our fellowship, the ISOC, which came out of the Church of Christ. But as I've gotten older, I felt a bit more free from a lot of the sort of the straitjackets we put on ourselves or on other people in regards to how to read the Scriptures.
Right.
There's tons we don't know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of areas that we don't know absolutely, but we were. Let me stop saying we. There are a lot of things that I did not know absolutely, but I acted so absolutely certain about it. And some of us have ways of bearing our will upon other people and persuading people. Maybe sometimes when we ought to be quiet and listen more. I don't know, but yeah, as I've gotten older, I've just felt a bit more free, and I read the Bible differently, and consequently, I'm sure I'll have a lot of apologies to make to Paul for some things that I said way back there, about and that's why you're not married, dude. That attitude you have to, that's, but I think that I think Paul had a very Christ-like attitude towards that. He had to be a sinner like us. Paul, respecting somebody and holding them up and admiring them and following them like they follow Jesus is one thing.
Sure.
Revering any of these Bible characters the way we revere God or Jesus, I think, or the Holy Spirit, that's different. And Paul, as Christ-like as he was, Paul was. He didn't always empty himself of himself. For example, he said he considered his birthright. He considered, I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews, the tribe of Benjamin, educated by Gamaliel, circumcised the 8th day, educated by Gamaliel. He starts going in and all, and he says, but I consider all of this rubbish. Dung, I think, is a more accurate translation compared to knowing Jesus Christ, right? He says that. What is that? Philippians? Am I getting that right? I think close. But you see, when they're about to beat him, right? He goes back to Jerusalem, and he gets arrested, and they're about to beat him. And what does he say?
Hi, I'm a Roman citizen. Is this okay?
I'm getting that right. It was in Philippi. It was in Philippi. It was when he was in Philippi, and they're well, no, wait. Let me get this right. It is in Jerusalem because they're about to beat him, and the guy is about to beat him, and Paul says, "Is it lawful for you to scourge a Roman citizen without benefit of trial?"
Yep.
And he says, wait a minute. And he goes and he gets Claudius Lysias. Claudius Lysias, who is, the centurion in charge, comes back over and says, are you a Roman citizen? And Paul says, yes, I am. I've always pictured sort of hung up, if he'd been like this, yeah, I'm a Roman citizen. I don't know exactly what the posture was, but yes, I'm a Roman citizen. And Claudius says, I had to buy my Roman citizenship. And Paul says, yeah, I'm naturally born Roman citizen. Naturally born Roman from Tarsus, Cilicia, not a small, and then Claudius says, take him down. And now he's, we can't be, well, one thing I think I've been fairly accurate about in regards to Paul for many years is this. Paul considered his birthright dung compared to knowing Jesus, but not compared to a beaten.
He had his limits, right? He was like,
let's let's pull it out. Let's use everything we can. It didn't prevent him from 5 times being, receiving the 40 lashes minus 1. The Jewish punishment.
Right, because they wouldn't care if he was a Roman citizen.
5 times. 5 times to get 39, and different things I've read. I think I got an idea how they did that, but still, I mean, they're like, well, they didn't really hit him 39 times. They hit him 3 times with a whip that had 13 ends on it, and so 3 times 13 is, fine. You get hit 3 times with a skillful person that can beat you, with we hear these stories about the cat of 9 tails. That's a different Roman thing. With the Jewish people, they scourged people with a whip that had 13 ends, and that way they could be absolutely certain that they never gave anyone more than 39 lashes, so they never violated the law of 40 lashes. 5 times they did that to Paul.
Yeah.
3 times he was beaten with rods. That was a Roman thing, and that was, as I understand it, that was kind of like the caning that they do to somebody, and some of the and some other nations that I will allow to remain anonymous, but its initials is like Singapore or someplace like that.
Gotcha.
3 times I was beaten with rods. So,
right.
So Paul went through his sufferings, but if he could use his passport to get out of a jam, he would use his passport to get out of a jam.
Yeah, and that's what I love about all the stories about Paul in Acts, because he just seems to leap out of the page. Like this is a real person. I feel like Peter comes across like that in the Gospels. I feel like in the book of Acts, like you get like a lot of Peter, and then like all of a sudden it just switches, and they drop that storyline, and it kind of zeroes in on Paul. But I love, and even in his letters, I love the vulnerability of Paul. Like he seems like a real human being that's like communicating his heart and like his soul in these situations that he gets put in. What are some of your favorite stories about Paul?
Well, if you don't mind, if we can back up for just a second. I don't know. This is where my mind sort of goes
Sure.
in circles a little bit, because the only person I can think of who never claimed to be inspired in the ways that what does it mean to be inspired by the Holy Spirit to write holy words? I still don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But of all of the writers, at least we have Luke saying, I carefully investigated this. Luke never claims to have been inspired. Now, whether someone wants to say, are you saying the book of Acts is not inspired? I'm not exactly sure. I'm not the scholar that can tell you what inspiration of the Holy Spirit, how that works exactly. And I don't really know if anyone is really an expert on that particular subject. But when you talk about Peter and his story, the Peter we see as a pillar of the early church, as the leader there in Jerusalem, we see him through the eyes of someone that didn't live with him the way Luke lived with Paul.
Mm.
And I often wonder if Luke doesn't he's carefully investigated, he's got the stories, he wants to make sure to record these epic moments. But you think of all the stories he missed. There were over 120 people in that upper room, and that was composed of Jesus' earthly family, his mother. I mean, there must be some early church Mary stories and I know there are some extra biblical stories. I know that those exist in other ways, but I'm saying we didn't get those in the book of Acts. And Thomas is like, hey, could I get a chapter of when I left and went to, and everybody looked at him and said, I doubt it. There's others. It's almost as if Luke raced through carefully recording the early stuff, but when he got to Paul, it's like, this is the part of the story that he had lived some of it. that he knew more about. And
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. Yeah.
With Peter, I guess what I'm doing, I'm putting in a plug for Peter. You kind of have to read between the lines after the Gospels. We love Peter so much because Peter's me, man. Peter is, you know, he's putting his foot in his mouth. Peter is, you know, just quick to, you know, just jump out there. You know, Peter, if it was, you know, Peter seems to just be very large in the gospel. I think he's enormous in the book of Acts as it is, but it does switch. It's sort of like, you know, the first 10, 11 chapters are about Peter. Then the rest of it seems to focus so much on Paul, and Peter makes a couple of cameo appearances.
Right.
But I don't know. The reason why I didn't want to go on from that is to say,
sure.
I think for me, one of the things I love, and it is so rich about Peter in the Gospels, is it's almost as if it's in there to say, if this guy can be a Christian, any of us can be a Christian. And I don't think I'm defaming or putting Peter down to say that. Peter's just a very human person with a great soul, but just the humanity just comes out. Paul is so hard for me to relate to. Paul, he's smart.
Yeah.
He's a Harvard grad, you know, or Oxford or whatever you want. I mean, he's got a top shelf education. He seems so disciplined. He seems so, you know, and so he ain't Jesus, but in another way, he sets an almost unattainable goal, yet the whole time he's human. And so it's basically, he's another example. If Peter's in there, like, if this guy can be a Christian, anybody can be a Christian. It's almost as if Paul's in there. So the Lord is saying, if this guy can do it, you can do it. He's just a man. He puts his pants on one leg at a time the same way as you do. And so to me, these are just upward calls, just challenges to try to be a better human being. Yeah.
Yeah. Peter, I've even evolved in my understanding of Peter too. Like, even doing some deep dives into the Old Testament has made me realize that a lot of times when I used to read with my own lens, Peter is being like, you know, a fool here, or sticking his foot in his mouth, like how like smart Peter really was. Like, Peter was really doing some, you know, even when he would say stuff and Jesus would, you know, like when Jesus was on the mountain and he got transfigured before them, right? And then he starts, you know, they're like, he didn't know what he was talking about. He starts talking about, oh, I'm going to build a tent for Elijah and a tent for Moses and one for you, you know, Jesus, you know. And I used to always be like, why would he do that? And then, like, you know, you think back to, like, you know, the cave that Moses was in, and in the cave that Elijah was in, where they got to, you know, meet the presence of the Lord, you know, in various forms, you know. And then Peter wanting to construct something for Jesus, him understanding, you know, like, he saw him as this great teacher, this great prophet, and why he was out of his mind is because he didn't realize that Jesus was God. You know, but Peter's thinking was like, he was doing some deep thinking there.
Well, they were shining.
Yeah.
They were, and when things shine, you build a tabernacle. That's what that's what you do. When things shine, I like listening to you. I hadn't thought about that in particular.
Yeah. It's just a different thing, because I like really what you said about, like, uncertainty, like, you know, and like being comfortable with maybe the way I've always looked at something isn't the only way to look at it, you know. And that was my gateway into that thinking was Paul, you know, because it was like something like I didn't understand what he said here, you know. I felt like you said before, like, a lot of Paul has been kind of used to, you know, beat people over the head. You need to do this, you need to do that. You know, the church that I was a part of here, you know, obviously, you know it because you led it. Like, even like the purity culture, like we were always like, you know, we have to be pure. And that meant for us like sexual purity. Like, you know, we had to, like, and all that stuff, and using a lot of Paul's verses like that, which I'm not saying not in there. It's just that there's more to it than those lines that we pull out. There's a big thing going on. Paul has a big argument when he's referencing the purity laws. It's not just about sexual purity. There's a whole bunch of other stuff he's doing there. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
That's fine. We've got a bunch of sexual hangups. I know that. I don't. When I think of purity culture, whether I think of Paul or Jesus, I think.
I think I lost you there.
Have you got me now?
Oh, we got you now.
We got you back. Oh,
So,
and she's gone.
I'm using my phone.
Really? That's so cool.
So, I almost had a plan, and then I had trouble, accessing. But I don't know that I completely grasp what everybody means when they say purity culture, because I certainly believe that there's something about purity that is supposed to mean a lot to disciples. But what I gather, especially from talking with younger people, when the phrase purity culture is used, it's to me the crux of the matter seems to be a both a double standard, that there seems to be one standard for and especially with young men and young women in regards to how young women dress, and this is the whole aspect of teaching young people that girls and women are temptations that are like drink to an alcoholic or drugs to an addict, a woman. So there's that aspect, and so there's a double standard, as if that the women here again, that the women are the problem. And now you talk about some deep diving. We do have to really dive deep on that subject to understand that no one is suggesting that Christians are supposed to be impure by almost any definition you use for that word. I mean, we're not. I mean, the very nature of the word, but also we can't be suggesting that with the only way we're ever made pure is being perfected by Jesus, because we're going to mess up. We're going to fall, and so we're only cleaned up by the grace of God. Yeah. But it's not just. So there's that aspect, but the other aspect, and how I think it pertains to Paul, is we're determined as people, I think, to make a religion. And it seems like what happened from Jesus to it seemed like Jesus came to end religion as it was known and create something that is completely different, to show. It's sort of like, let's take the most regimented, list out every possible way you could sin and violate one of these 150 plus different laws that God gave Moses on Sinai. It was way more than 10, and you have to follow this rigidly, and just so I can show you're going to mess up. So having done that through Jesus, he shows us grace. And so when you bring up Paul and purity culture, I don't think grace means that we don't care, what we do, or that we're free to just do anything we want and say that's okay.
Sure.
I think there's a release from the idea that we will ever be perfect on our own, and that we have to be perfected through Jesus and following Jesus. Which to me, it just means that we're always works in progress. We ought to be caught in the middle of trying to be a better person the day we die. because we're not going to have arrived. We're not going to be. We need to be right in the middle. You know, when he comes, he needs to find us working at trying to continue to follow him, and that's what I think all the guys, Paul included. I think that's what they were trying to show and help us. And you look at Paul, his main life in essence seemed to be all poured into, I've got to get this word of Jesus everywhere. I've got to take it everywhere. And so that was and why? Because the ministry of Jesus and the word of Jesus, and I may be boiling it down too simplistic, but it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love others. I mean, it seems like the message was love others. I'm reminded of an old preacher story. I don't know if it's true or not. My friend James Lloyd used to tell it all the time, and he was really great at remembering the names of the people in the story. But whoever was the guy that started the Salvation Army, the story is credited with him that he wanted to send a telegram out to encourage everyone, one Christmas, everyone that was working in the Salvation Army, and he only had enough money to send one word as far as he wanted to go to as many people as he wanted to go. And when he realized that, he took a moment to pray and to think, and he went back to the guy and he wrote down the word others. And so he sent this word others all out across, just as this is how I'm going to encourage, challenge, this is inspire others. And to me, I think that's the message of Christ that Paul was urgently trying to get out. It's others. Don't kill people. Don't lie to people. Don't hurt people. If we could learn how to treat others the way Jesus treated us, it's not just I think we could make the world a better place, which isn't ever going to totally happen. I think we start becoming more like the merciful God that we have. So
yeah,
I don't know how I got off on that tangent. You can rope me back in.
I might go off on my own thing too, because I think you're making me think about that. That's what I love about Paul too, because I think for Paul, it's all about erasing those barriers that keep people apart, that keep people from loving each other. And I think in doing that, I think there's a certain line of thinking. Oh, you can't do that too much. You can't erase too many of the lines, because then there's going to be anarchy. There's going to be craziness. But a lot of times it's those lines that keep people apart. Maybe it's racial lines. Maybe it's denomination lines. Maybe it's like, we crack over who's right and who's wrong. Maybe it's just lines of unforgiveness. Like, there are things that I won't look past. There's things that I can't let go of. And, I love how Paul's all about, no, that stuff is gone. We're one in Christ. We're one in Christ, and what that means. Like, we're here with Jesus. That dividing wall of hostility has been abolished. And I love that about Paul. I want more of that.
I totally agree. I think one of the problems I've had my whole life is how to keep score. It seems to be whether it's just my own corruption, being a guy, being a person, or whatever I allowed to influence me. It seemed that I grew up and for years and years and years believed in, and I don't know that I've shaken it at all. I'm not, but I believe that there must be some way that we keep score of how well we're doing. Are we making any progress? And when I hear myself saying that out loud, I have another part of me is like, well, yeah, are you making any progress? What are you doing? There have been so many times, and the younger Steve felt very successful. We're doing it. We are turning the world upside down. The older Steve very much feels like a failure, and that how do you measure what are we doing and what are we accomplishing? and then you want to be careful. I want to be careful. I don't want to justify things. As I get analytical about these things, I don't want to try to come up to some great, theory of everything to try to justify what I've done or haven't done. But it all puts me in this headspace to look at Paul and think he lived valiantly to spread the story of Jesus, but not just the story, but to demonstrate the best he could how Jesus would do things in a situation. And that's something I think we're duty bound and morally bound, and I think the pledge we make when we get baptized, that's something that we want to carry out until we die. That we and I don't know. I don't want to be an old guy that says, well, numbers don't matter. To me, anytime souls get saved, that's a wonderful thing. But I also think a whole lot about how many people have been alienated from one another when we agree on so much, and there's so much about Christ that we agree on. But I'm on this tangent because I don't know how envious I should be of the guys who lived in the first century for that little bitty pocket of time when there was only one church on every corner. When Peter preaches in Acts chapter 2 and everybody gets baptized and the church starts, that was the first one. It wasn't like they could say, well, we're going to go to this other church and hear what that guy's got to say. Now, they could go and they could listen to the Judaism that rejected Jesus, or they could go to a pagan world. But there was a time that there really was just, if you want to be a Christian, this is the group you identify with. And now, there's so much division in Christendom. It has been my whole life and your whole life and the lives of people before us for 1900 years that I don't know. Looking at Paul, there's a challenge that goes beyond keeping score. Mm-hmm. It goes, and it seems to be bigger than that. And I should probably come in for a landing, but I'm just going to let that one trail off. It was just. Yeah. How you doing?
Doing well. It's good stuff. I really appreciate your time here, talking to us about Paul over there. And I guess sunny Portland. I always heard Portland was very rainy. And then I went there and I'm like, where's the rain? It's nothing but sun and like clouds.
It'll come. We'll get some rain. Yeah. Might even get some snow. I don't know. But every time I'm tempted to say, man, it's really hot. I know in just Lord willing, a few short weeks from now, we're gonna be missing this warmth, and but anyway, Portland rain doesn't get you wet.
It's just like it's nice bath, nice shower, right?
Yeah, and I also hear that it only snows one time a year. That's very.
To me, every place is getting about the same. Where just as soon as you predict something, it's going to change. The weather will change on you. It's probably snowed. Of all the years I've lived here, it's probably snowed half of the winters and not snowed the other half.
Wow.
When it's drizzling and raining, this is a great place. If anyone wants a great place to go snow skiing, move to Portland, because when it's raining down here, it's snowing up on the mountain, and that's barely an hour away. So you can go to the mountain, or you can go surf, or you can go find obsidian out in the middle of the desert.
Yeah. Absolutely. That Saturday that we were in Portland, we ended up going near Mount Hood and magical. No, actually, honey, did we go up? We were at. Yeah, we were on. Yeah.
At the Overlook Hotel, I think.
Right.
Well, no, the Overlook is from The Shining.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Timberline. I see what you did. They only filmed the
Okay.
outside. They filmed the outside of Timberline. And at the beginning of that movie, when the Volkswagen is going up the road, that they are following the road up to Timberline, and then they shoot the outside. But the rest of that movie is all shot in the studio in England.
It's such a good. I love that movie. I still love that movie. A friend of mine is a huge Shining fan, Stephen King fan. It's actually on his retirement list. He was like, "Oh, you went there? That's awesome. That's like my retirement dream trip. He's gonna hit a whole bunch of them."
Well, the thing is, there's not. What was the room in the? Was it 229? Whatever the number of the room in the movie is, they do not have that room at Timberline on purpose.
Oh, nice.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But Steve, thank you so much. I know I was in the back end, and I really do appreciate when you mention about the certainty, right? Instead of looking at the way I've been calling it is I've been doing a lot of unlearning and learning and approaching the Bible as a discovery process. And I know Jimmy, one of the reasons we're also doing this broadcasting is because he's starting a class starting July 11th about Paul. So it's great. It's a great kickoff. We're most likely going to be live next week as well. Maybe we can have Lisa, maybe we can have both of you. We want to have more people really get to hear what people know or like or dislike. As you mentioned, a lot of things bother you in the Bible. Me too. When it was okay for me to say that, I was like, yes, because this has been bothering me for a really long time. I have space.
If I could,
yeah.
Since you brought, thank you, and please forgive me for interrupting. I want to say, and I'm not, I'm too old. I don't really feel much of a need to be defensive or careful, but I do want to say that usually when things bother me in the Bible, I think the problem is with me and not the Bible.
Right.
Right. And usually when I say it bothers me, the way I've interpreted things and believed things, a lot of things bug me, and I wonder if the problem is with the Bible or if the problem is with my own particular interpretation. So, but yeah, I think it's totally fine. I think if something bugs you, you're supposed to say it bugs you. I mean,
yeah.
I see a number of characters in the Bible doing that, and I think. I think we're supposed to be honest, but I think it's important to always remember we're clay. He's the potter. Maybe I'm out of line, but he's my father, creator, whatever. However you want to sum up the Lord. I believe that we are loved, and that we're not gonna get in too much trouble for questioning if our hearts are, as long as we're hungry and thirsting, I think we're okay. But
yes.
What do I know?
Yeah. And Jimmy, I know there are 10 classes. Do you want to tell people what you're looking for, what's coming in the next classes for you?
Yeah, so we're doing our Summer of Saul. We're going to be going through 2 books together, 2 N.T. Wright books, Paul biography, and How God Became King. 2 excellent books. If you've never heard of N.T. Wright before, you're welcome. He's amazing. He's not only a great biblical scholar, but he also is a good writer, which is very, very rare that they exist in the same place or the same person. So we're going to be doing that. And then on Sundays, we're going to be doing a class on Paul. We're going to go through some introductory material on Paul, and then we're going to be trying to go through the entire book of Ephesians. So we're excited about that. And then we'll close it off.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And Steve, you're getting away from Nereida Roman. She used to be in the Queen's Ministry as well. So, and we're letting a lot of people know about this live so they can come and watch the replay. So if you are watching the replay and you have any questions for Steve, put it in the comments and we'll let Steve know what they are. That way we could get him back to come back to another live, maybe with Lisa. And I know we're very tempted to going back to Portland. So we could even have the live in person. Who knows? We'll see. So we really appreciate your time, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. All right, let's do a quick picture if you guys don't mind. I'm going to do a screenshot and we'll end the show this way. Yay, we did it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Again, any questions, put in the comments. Thank you for those who joined from YouTube and Facebook as well. Bye, Steve. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Love you
Thank
guys.
you. Love you too.